Hello, everyone, and welcome back to today's episode of Real Take Real Estate with the Joseph team, where we give you our real take of today's housing market and everything real estate. I'm your host, Maddie Maloney, joined by my co-hosts,
Joe Sambear
and Sam Feda.
So today we have a very exciting topic and kind of a hot topic, I would say right now. We will be diving into second homes. So we will go through everything that you need to know of what a second home is actually considered to be in the mortgage world, the definition there, how this purchase is going to differ from your typical primary residence purchase, and kind of some trends that we have been seeing lately, with COVID, where people are currently trying to move to, and just some things that we've been seeing in the market today. So I love talking about second homes because, your primary residence, your first home purchase is typically going to be, kind of wherever your job lands you. Of course, it may be your dream home, but that second home purchase, that is really the exciting one. That's the one that I'm going to be excited for in the future. This is typically going to be your one that's going to be your vacation home. This is where your family is so excited to go and travel to. Maybe it's in a different state. You're going to look in Florida. Maybe it's a lake home. Maybe it's just your getaway in the woods that people are just so excited to get that second home. So very exciting topic. So Sam, I'm going to start off with you. What is defined in the mortgage world? What is a second home?
Sure, Maddie. So the second home is defined basically as, you have to leave it open for your exclusive use for at least 6 months out of the year. So it's different than, your primary residence where you intend to live and work. And then, it can't be rented out like an investment property. It can for the whole year, let's say. So it has to be open for the buyer's exclusive use for 6 months out of the year as their vacation home. It can't exclusively be a rental property, although you can have short-term renters in there for part of the year. But yeah, it all kind of revolves around that 6 month mark for the owner of the property.
Great. So we know that you have to live in there at least 6 months. Is there going to be like a distance requirement? Say that you bought your primary residence and you're looking at a second home. Is there a requirement of how far away that has to be?
Yeah, there's some restrictions with that. It does have to be a reasonable distance from your primary residence. Like if you lived in Lansing and you're looking for a second home in East Lansing, that might be, some red flags could go up there to where, you might be renting it out for student housing or just renting it in general. It's not far enough. It has to be, I believe it's like 90 miles away.
There are a few exceptions. There are some exceptions, logical exceptions. Like if you have a home on a lake and the lake is,
60 miles
away, and it's your primary residence is not like that. It's clear that that's a second home. So.
Okay, great. So we know what a second home is. Now, when people are going through and looking at getting pre-qualified for a second home, what is the difference from how this is going to be structured and look a little bit different than a primary residence purchase?
So yeah, we get this question when you said you have the excitement, the dream of, wow, I'm really ready for this next place. And it can be really confusing for the consumer of like, what does this look like? Is this totally different than my primary residence? I understood that purchase. Not sure I understand what to do with this. And what I'll say we'll start with is it is very similar to your primary residence. It's going to feel the same process as far as you obtaining the right team, getting a realtor to help you with it, getting your pre-approval together, starting that process is going to be very typical. And the length of the process, you can see our previous podcast, it's going to follow the same pattern of processing, underwriting, closing. But I'd say one of the bigger questions we get is, what's the down payment structure like? And so there is a little bit more risk on a second home as far as it's not your primary. So there's more risk in the market. So Fannie and Freddie have determined that 10% is the minimum down payment compared to 3 or 5 for conventional financing, and for primary residence, 10% is going to be your minimum into a second home. So the other difference, significant difference, is there can be a rate differential. So, and this is true with investment properties as well. Moving from a primary residence, Fannie and Freddie did put in a adjustment to rates probably over a year ago now, where it's a fairly significant difference in rate when you are buying a second home, depending on the down payment. So 10%, there's more of an increase differential between the primary residence rate. If you put more down, there's less of a difference, I'd say. And this is the one thing, Sam, you can touch on this a little bit, but typically from bank to bank, rates are very similar, I'd say, and you get a pretty good feel. Second homes is going to be a little bit different. You're going to have to do a little bit more research, a little bit more investigation, because there are some options that aren't as different.
Exactly, yeah. So Freddie and Fannie, basically they implemented within the last couple of years that they're going to charge higher rates and higher costs for borrowers to obtain those second homes. So if you're working with a lender that is exclusively, underwriting with Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, their pricing, rate pricing may not be in line with some other lenders who have different options and different investors that they use to back the loans. So we have one that, essentially does price their rates for a second home the same as a primary residence, even with that 10% down option. So even if it's not us, there may be other lenders out there that have additional options. So if you're getting quoted very high on a second home, it's certainly worth checking into other options there, because with primary residences, like Joe said, it's going to be relatively ballpark in the same category and same range of what lenders offer for a primary residence. But with the second home, there could be vast differences with rates there.
So I think going off of that, with the second home, and I know that we've touched on this with your primary residence, it's always great to have a team behind you, but especially when you're getting into looking for that second home purchase, because now more than ever, when you're looking at that primary residence purchase, typically it's going to be in an area that you're kind of familiar with, the area. When you're looking at that second home, maybe this is a dream location that you've vacationed at before, but you don't really know the neighborhoods. You don't know what the real estate market is like. So that's where it's super important to have a realtor that knows the area. If you are planning on doing short-term rentals, they know what areas do allow that and can advise you, yes, this would be a good opportunity, or this one doesn't allow for short-term rentals, just making you aware of everything. But then also having your lender behind you and making sure that you're aware of all those options, and that has those different types of investors to help get you the best pricing and the best rate for this. So again, just make sure you have your team behind you.
Maddie, you bring up a really good point with this, because this is where you can make some big mistakes. Like you said, with a primary residence, it's pretty cut and dry. You have a buyer's agent, home inspector, generally speaking, what's going on. Obviously, there's some risks there too, but when you get into areas you are not familiar with, and you don't have that sphere of influence of other people you can rely on to get their opinion, this is where you can walk into some trouble. Mainly, I would say, you're looking at a condo association, you might not be aware what's going on with that building, especially if it's on oceanfront, lakefront. Usually,
are you speaking from experience,
Yes.
there, Joe?
Yes. And you'll run into situations where there might be an assessment looming. There might be issues with the building. When you get near lake property, you can get into a flood zone you might not be aware of. And like you said, Maddie, the short-term rental rules vary throughout the country. They vary throughout each state and city. So you really need to look out at those things. And you can get kind of caught up in that excitement of that dream and not have those warning flashes and red flags of wait a second, this has been listed for a while. It's a good price. Something might not be quite right.
Asking all the right questions to the right people that are helping you out.
Yeah.
But with asking the right questions, sometimes when you're going to purchase that second home, you don't even know what questions to ask. So that's why we are here as a team to even advise you on stuff that, maybe I should have asked about the mortgage insurance on this for 10% down, or maybe I should have asked about the condo association dues or homeowners association, and just, we help advise you on everything that you just may not even have been aware of before. So just having that team is so important.
Another thing from experience, mortgage insurance is a little different on a second home as far as the removal and the whole process. So it's all kind of case by case, but that's one tidbit from experience.
So when you are looking at purchasing that second home, maybe you do contact the realtor that helped you purchase your primary residence, and maybe they would be familiar with the area that you're looking for a second home purchase, but also most likely realtors are going to have a network of people that they can refer you to have other experts in that area. Maybe you're looking northern Michigan, maybe you are looking in Florida. We do know realtors that they themselves have purchased second homes in Florida. So they do both Michigan and Florida, and they have connections down there. Just like we have agents, we know insurance people down there. We have those different sorts of connections. So if you're even thinking about possibly purchasing a second home, I would say that before anything, you start to gather your team. You start to gather your experts who are going to help you throughout this process. Even if you start looking on Zillow right now, trying to figure out your home, get your team behind you first so that we can really help guide you and help navigate through any potential issues that you may not have even thought of before.
And make it more of an enjoyable process.
Definitely. That's the biggest thing, is that we want to clear up any possible issues at the very start. Even when it comes to the mortgage process, like that's why we do kind of our upfront underwriting. We want to make sure that everything down the process is going to be as smooth as possible. So when you even think of starting looking, gather your team, get your experts on the phone, and just start asking them and having that conversation just to kind of get the ball rolling.
One last thing about this too, taxes. I will say taxes, whether it's here or throughout the country, usually most areas have your homestead, your primary residence has usually some kind of tax credit. And then usually when you get to second home investment properties, you're not going to have that homestead credit. So even looking at, the current taxes are this, that's where you really want to engage with your realtor and your lender partner to say, what's the estimated taxes? Because it might be pretty dramatically different than what you're paying.
Yes.
What they were paying.
Especially when looking at a second home, it's most likely not going to be that estimated monthly payment that you see on Zillow or Realtor.com. It is so important to get with your lender to get an accurate estimation of what it's going to be so that you know exactly what you're getting into, you're comfortable with that monthly payment, and you're comfortable with the funds that are going to be needed for closing and the rate and the whole situation. It's just so important to know all of that information up front. All right, so we've gone over what a second home is defined as, and then what to expect from the loan process, kind of how it differs from a primary residence purchase. Now, let's talk about some trends that we have seen. I think ever since COVID, we have seen some different trends on the market for second homes. So, Joe, I don't know if you want to start with that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, the demand for second homes has increased dramatically, and that's throughout the country. And I think COVID and having that during that period, a lot of travel was going on, and people started localizing things a little bit and saying, you know what, I really want more space. I really want to travel with my family or travel somewhere closer. I want to have a place to go. And the demand really spiked for that. And we're seeing it still continue in that regard. The other trend I would say is the whole VRBO Airbnb. And that's been a really significant change in how people are using second homes. The use of the property has changed dramatically. And fortunately, the agencies, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, realized that. That's where that 6-month usage that you have to have control of the property and use it have it available for your exclusive use, yet allowing a seasonal rental or a short-term rental. And that really has to do with VRBO, and even in homeowners insurance had to change a little bit, because before, a lot of times the insurance kind of dictates how you use the property. If you're going to rent it out year round, you're going to have this kind of insurance. If you're going to have it as your primary usage or second usage, you're going to rent it this or have insurance this way. Well, now you kind of have they have some policies that kind of do both. So even from the homeowner's insurance, it had to change a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. One other trend I think too that is relevant is with the second home, obviously the buyer has their primary residence. It's a kind of a little bit longer of a drawn out process because they're looking for that specific place, maybe in a specific area in a tight market. So it's one thing that, not going to happen overnight, just making sure you spend that time wisely during that time period to make sure you have that plan built out financially and all that to make sure, when that perfect home does come, you're well prepared, because it can be more drawn out than a primary residence if you're like relocating or need to move up to a bigger house because you have a growing family. It's a lengthier process sometimes.
Definitely.
With the second home.
I think you were just mentioning how you have some people that, how long were they searching for their second home?
Yeah, like over 2 years that they finally found properties. I think I had 4 of them just this year alone that we kind of had a long relationship going because we were constantly checking in over that time period. But they found the perfect places. So it can be drawn out.
But so
sure.
with those people that had been looking for 2 years, they were pre-approved at the beginning of it.
Exactly.
So then every time they checked in, we had that ready for them. We had the documentation. So even though it's going to take forever, we advise you strongly still get pre-approved. If you're even thinking about purchasing a second home and you really don't want to wait until the last minute when you're like, oh my gosh, this is the perfect one. Offers are due in 2 days. Oh, I guess I got to get with my lender right now. That, of course, we can do it. We are happy to do it. But it really would have been better if you started the process early on so that if there are any, any obstacles that we have to go through for that pre-approval, we get it worked up in the beginning. And then we are happy to work with you for however long it takes to get that second home.
And it's funny you mentioned that because I've gotten some strange calls and interesting calls over the years of, we're getting on a plane in 10 minutes and we're looking at this house. Can we do this real fast? Or, we're driving, heading this way. We're going to look at something and make an offer immediately. And when I look back at that, usually those didn't have the best experience, and it wasn't the best idea, and they didn't feel comfortable purchasing. But then I've had others, like Sam's indicated, where they called me and they said, hey, we're thinking about doing this. We spent 10, 15 minutes talking, and then I get that call 2 months later saying we're on our way. Can we update that pre-approval, get that scenario? And usually now you've had time to think it through, and it just is a better experience from what I could see.
Definitely. So one other point that I wanted to bring up, and we talked about how you have to have 10% down for a second home purchase. But one thing that a lot of people don't know, I feel like, is where that 10% can come from. So Joe, can you hit on how people can use their primary residence and the equity that they have to potentially help fund that 10% down?
Yeah, we've had some really good experiences with that over the years. We've when rates are good and the first mortgage rates we're in a good interest rate environment, we've had a lot of situations where we've actually refinanced and taken cash out to use for the down payment for the second home. So that's been very successful of kind of just looking at the whole picture instead of just looking at this one transaction, saying, okay, let's just do this. Let's take the money from your investments or whatever, actually looking at all the real estate owned, looking at all the mortgages and coming up with a plan of saying, well, we can actually pay off that one, this one, and get your down payment, structure it this way. We've had several situations like that.
Yeah.
Or we can, of course, look at a home equity line of credit where you are just using maybe a smaller loan, a second mortgage, a line of credit to help fund or make sure you feel like you have a little more safety net to purchase that next house.
And one tool we've used too in the past where, some people in purchasing second homes may own their first home free and clear, where we can get them a better deal, leveraging the equity in their current home and doing just the cash out refinance on their primary residence to pay cash for that second home as well. So that's a unique option where we can put together a little bit better deal for them in those scenarios too. So just looking at the whole bigger picture of all the real estate owned and seeing what we can do.
just another reason, come talk to us.
Yes.
We are happy to talk about the different options. You don't have to just come up with the 10% down out of pocket. There are typically lots of options that we can go to so that you don't have to break the bank, that you have some funds left over to furnish the second home, maybe purchase a boat or something fun, some funds that you have to really get the best experience out of this second home and just make it that dream vacation home that you want it to be. So, all right. So any final thoughts on second home? Joe, did you want to go over maybe your process with buying a second home?
Yeah. I mean, I think every time you look at a second home like that, there's so many different things to contemplate. This one is the market area.
Yeah.
You know, are you sold on the area? That's like obviously real estate 101 is the location, making sure it's in the right location that suits that property. So we're not going to try to, I would not recommend trying to do vacation rental, short-term rental in a market that doesn't have vacation short-term rentals. Yeah. Let's not try to start a trend. Let's, so the location, how are you viewing this property? Are you viewing it for just like, this is my family's usage, this is my usage, I really get a joy out of being here, it's helping my mental health, it's helping this, and I'm okay with the expense? Or are you viewing this as an investment, or both? So I think you just have to kind of think logically through what's my plan for this property? How's the cash flow going to work? And what's the long term? What's my plan? Am I going to keep this for 5 years and this is how I'm going to finance it? Or is this an investment that I want to have to sell during retirement, or something I'm going to keep in my family forever? So I think there's a lot of different, also, we didn't talk about this much, but you know, at a second home, sometimes we get a situation where we have two siblings that want to buy the house together, and that is okay. Yeah. And that's another thing I guess we didn't really touch on is we do see more multiple applicants with second homes. And I think one advice I would say with that is just make sure, Maddie, you can even speak to this better. Make sure you have, if you have a family type second home, have some rules or plan of like, how is the down payment going to be split? How is the monthly payment going to be addressed? How are you going to handle expenses and repairs and so on?
Yeah, maybe I should bring in all of my family and uncles into this. A little side story. My dad has 6 brothers, and they, along with my grandpa, all went in on the purchase of our family's cottage. And so that whole thing was a little bit of a fiasco, but I feel like it was a smooth process, and it's very smooth sharing it with our family because they all sat down, went over the finances, and really created rules for it so that there's no questions about who can use it when, who's paying for what, and it's that open conversation because you really don't want it to create any family conflicts down the road of something that pops up or an unexpected expense or something. You really want to make sure that everyone is on board, everyone is on the same page, and just making sure that you keep having that conversation with your family, and maybe you write down some rules for it for everyone to follow, or having some common, just practices that everyone knows to follow by will just help make everything smooth in the future, and you don't have any family feuds over the property.
I think, and second homes, I think, tend to be handed over to the next generation as well, compared to the primary residence. Usually a primary residence is sold at death, but second home, not necessarily. So again, make sure the title is how you want it, as far as if something happens to this person, what happens next?
Making sure that you have that future plan and that everyone is on board with that, and that also maybe you have it written down, maybe you have everyone sign it so that there's no confusion in the future. Because I have heard of, some second homes kind of tearing families apart. If one family wants to sell or one family doesn't, one family wants to buy it out, but then how do you go about that? What is the price? So you really want to be careful if you are going in with your family. Make sure that you are willing to go into business with these people, because that's pretty much what it is, and that you're comfortable with sharing finances and everything like that. But it is just so amazing too what a second home can do. I can't tell you the amount of memories that I have at my family's cottage, and just how much joy it has brought my family, just being all together, having those family reunions, going there in the summers. It is just most of my favorite memories come from that. So a second home can just bring you so much joy. It can bring you some revenue if you want to go down the investment route. So there's just so many opportunities, and just so much there with the second home. All right. Any final thoughts on that?
Look forward to helping you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. So if you are thinking of a second home, please reach out, get your team established, make sure that you have the right people and the right partners to help guide you through this process. So we've gone over a second home, what it's defined as, how it differs from a primary residence purchase, and kind of some of the trends that we've seen. So to our listeners, if you guys have liked today's episode, please give us a 5-star review. Let us know if you have any follow-up questions on a second home. And we hope to see you on the next episode of Real Take Real Estate with the Joseph team. Thank you so much.